Hey everybody, how you doing today? Yet another edition of Uncut Unedited 1002 Bible Reading Devotions with Pastor Troy. I think that's what we call it. Maybe you know better than I do by now. Or maybe you know we just always call it something different. Have you been enjoying reading the book of Matthew? I hope you have been enjoying reading it because that means you're reading it. What a delight it is to be in the book of Matthew. I often, when I'm reading the Gospels, I prefer to read only a chapter a day because I would rather, for my own devotional preference, read less and meditate more than to read a whole bunch. But at the same time, I actually love to zoom out and see a little bigger picture. And that's what I want to do today, thinking about the parable of the sower and then the teaching of Jesus related to the kingdom of God. The parable of the sower is listed in all of the Gospels, and if you haven't read it, it's about Jesus telling the story about the sower goes out and he sows seed, and he sows on the different kinds of soil, on the road, and on the rocky place, and a place with weeds, and then really good soil. And at the end of the parable, the disciples don't really understand what's going on with what he's saying. And he says, if you don't understand this parable, then you're not going to be able to understand any of the parables, literally. And what Jesus is talking about is the gospel, that it's going out, preparing for the kingdom of God. It's the opportunity to respond in faith. And the different approaches that people have. He first says that the seed is sown on a very hard surface on the road, and the devil immediately comes, and the birds come, which is the devil, and snatches up that seed, and it never actually germinates or takes root at all. And then there's seed that's sown in the rocky places, and it's just unable to bear fruit because it doesn't get the depth of root that it needs. And then the other grows up with weeds, and it tangles and destroys the fruit. And then the last is the good soil, which bears 30, 60, and 100-fold fruit. And so Jesus is challenging the disciples, saying, hey, most people are not going to respond to this good news. But those who do will respond over a long period of time, and the evidence of their life will be fruitful living. And so that's how he kind of begins this. But then he gives, in chapter 13, if you read it, it's a very long chapter, he gives a parable of other illustrations other than just the fact of the sower and the seeds. He talks about a farmer who went out to plant a field, and he planted a field with wheat. But then an enemy comes in and plants a field with weeds. In Iowa, we talk about corn and beans. And it would be as though someone came in and sowed just switchgrass or some kind of weed in the field, or maybe I don't know what the most prominent weed is. I'm not actually a farmer, but you farmers know what I'm talking about. And people would say, hey, why did you put weeds in your field? And the farmer said, I just put in the right seeds, but I'm going to wait until harvest time, and that's when I'm going to send the combine in, and I'm going to combine either the corn or the beans, and those weeds are going to go away. And then Jesus actually talks about a mustard seed, and he talks about leaven that gets in all of the dough, and he gives other principles of the kingdom. He talks about a man who goes into a field and he finds a pearl, and then he buys a field and with joy comes and does that. And then he talks about a parable of a net that goes out, and he talks about a storehouse of truth. And just the whole idea that Jesus is saying is, number one, the gospel is going to be rejected. And he even told his disciples when he sent them out, I'm sending you out as sheep among wolves. Now, if I would have been there, I would have been thinking, hey, Jesus, maybe you could have said lion among wolves. Or maybe you mixed the metaphor. Maybe you meant to say a wolf among sheep. Because sheep don't get away from the flock, and they certainly don't go after a pack of wolves. But no, Jesus was getting it right. He said, you're going to be attacked. You're going to be beaten. You're going to be rejected. But then he says, but it's worth it. And all of these parables about the kingdom, if you zoom out, you can narrow in and meditate on any one and the details. You can actually say things probably more than Jesus intended by that. But here's the large point of the parables. Guys, there's going to be hardship in living your life for the kingdom of God, but it's worth it. There's going to be frustrations and suffering that come along with life, but it's going to be worth it. Because even though all of the disciples had struggle in their lives, and all but one died a martyr's death, at least other than Judas, he committed suicide, they would say to all of us, it's worth it. I love what the writer of Hebrews says. He says, if a man pursues God, he must believe that he is, and that he's a rewarder of those who seek him. And guys, the reward is not in this life. There's no pattern in the Bible that guarantees that you're going to get the reward in this life. But the truth of the kingdom, it is worth it, and the reward is to come. So keep reading the scriptures, and I hope you're encouraged today.